and download the app at the App Store, which one gets the first touch points, or which one gets the conversion credit? Obviously, the email gets the first touch points because that's the first instance of becoming aware of the app. But if this person doesn't act through the CTA right there, goes directly to the app stores. So that's what we're talking about here when we talk about the touch points. So the touch points are, for instance, as I said, an email was the first touch points in which the user engaged with the customer. Also with the campaign activity, but the download didn't take place there. So the credit must be given to App Store, or should be given to the email address, the email campaign. So basically, that's the question. Where are you going to allocate these credits in terms of conversion? Was because of the email address that led to the conversion via the App Store? Was because just the App Store on its own? What will be your take there? So let me put this way. I will summarize this with that on the screen. So imagine you are launching a new fitness app, all right? Let's call it FitLife, for an example. And you're running a campaign across various channels, social media ads, email marketings, in-app referrals, all right? So that's what you're doing. Then a username, Priya, sees your ad on Instagram, all right? Clicks it, browse your app features, but doesn't download it right away, all right? A week later, she received an email about free trial. Click the link and finally download FitLife. How do you determine the touch points? The Instagram ad or the email gets the credit for the conversion. So if you can unmute, I'll be very happy to hear your answer. Who gets the credit here? A fitness app, run a social media campaigns, nothing happens there, but Priya sees the ad, click on it, doesn't do anything until she receives an email, then she downloads the app. So let's have their comments there. Who gets the credit for the touch points? Let me have a look at the comments.
There's a comment from Clotly So that says email leads the user to the action of downloading. Sabelo says campaign.
And any specific reason why you selecting your questions? Given that there are different answers. Sorry, selecting your answers, given that there are different answers. Which one, why you believe an email must get the credit? Why social media, Instagram must get the credit? Yeah, go ahead. You can unmute, I think. Yeah, you're audible now.
Yeah, so I think it's the ad campaign, because that's where they saw like that the app actually exists. But the email, yeah, also does make sense, because then after they saw the email, that's when they actually started using the app.
So I'm going to repeat these questions again. Thank you for sharing. How do you determine which touch points? So you're actually now comparing an Instagram and the email. How do you determine which touch points gets the credit for this conversion? So basically, a download action happened. There's a hand up. Go ahead.
To me, I think an email, because it actually made the customer aware of the product, even though the call to action did not take place. But then because he had that at the back of his mind that he needs the product, then he later downloaded. So I'll give it to the email.
Definitely the email should be given the credit. And I'm going to break it down easily for you two guys to understand. So the CTA here, call to action, was download to convert a user, to actually have a user. So the action that happens within that environment is the one that defines the results. So if awareness was what the objective was, then Instagram would have received the credit for creating the awareness, because Priya saw these advertisements for the first time via Instagram. But here, the key to this question is the conversion. When did Priya decide to actually download the app? It's when that email was sent. So the conversion happened in the email environment. So if you have to put a value between the two, and your objectives is to drive conversion rate high, then the email will be the one that is a useful channel, where probably it's where you should spend more money at. But it does get complicated than just picking one over another, because they all work as a chain of causation. Probably your causation to be able to convert to users such as Priya is to run social medias and then go to an email as a follow-up or a conversion added on, so CTA via an email. But it can also be, obviously, you need to understand how many of these people watch these things on social media, and how many of them end up actually converting using emails. If it's just only Priya, so you don't really have anything to work with there, because probably that was just by like or by just an event. So all of this helps you understand exactly where the flow, the journey of the customers, where they start and where they end in relation to your objectives. So thank you for participating in that. So obviously this data, it's important when you look at all the data, putting the touch points, where data sits around these touch points, because it helps you be able to understand how to make these decisions. Either you want to refine your campaigns or you want to add more stuff in your campaign. So Google Analytics 4 does help you to get the tracking of all these events in your app in a very accurate way, because now you will know that she saw it in Instagram, but she downloaded the app via email. So data forms the basis of attribution model. Then you need, this also helps you understand which touch points deserve the most credit. We're not saying that the other touch points were useless, all right? But we're saying if conversion is your agenda, where did it take place? So attribution models examine the sequence or the customer's journey or funnel from different touch points all the way until your marketing objective is achieved or not achieved. So let's look there on your screen. You will see that there is, let's explore some of the most common attributes models, starting with last click attributes, first click attributes, which really does get a lot of even marketers trying to figure out exactly how to understand this. Is because the last click attribution, right? This is like giving all the glory to the funnel player. So you could say, well, look, I don't care about Instagram and the stuff, but I will continuously probably do it. But email, it's what I will give it as what you call it, the last click attribution, because that's where everything happens. So I'm going to give 100% to last click attribution. You could say, well, okay, let's look at this. What is relevant? What it reveals here is that it could probably clearly identifies the channels responsible for driving conversion. So they could be working together very well. You might find that as much as you're driving, we have an objective to drive conversion, you're running social medias, they could be probably performing a warm-up role that leads to Priya downloading your app. So obviously there are potential blind spots that you need to be careful of. Yeah, it's because if you go with the last click attribution, like you say, there is just an email conversion, nothing else, is that you might actually downplay the importance of probably looking at other channels that feeds into it, into the funnel destination. It could also be, that probably overall you need to relook at all your touch points altogether and how they fit into the last destination, which is your last click attribution. You also obviously one could say, no, I don't care about the last click attribution because, again, not to say don't care, but in this case of this example, you both have two different examples. One was last click contribution was one other one was first click. So let's look at first click, which was also given as an answer here. So basically what it means, this model, it almost does the opposite of the last click. So you look at exactly where they first saw the ad, and that's where you give all the credits. And so it doesn't matter what end up happening with downloading the app via an email, but you saw it on Instagram. Therefore, Instagram gets all the credit. Yeah, Silas, your hand is up.
Sure. And if we're looking at the last click, can we put that as organic download, because we wouldn't know when he actually did the first click of the email, and later on he did the last click on Play Store? Will that be considered as organic?
No, it can be, because if you're running an email campaigns, I'm sure you paid for it as well, graphic designs and all that stuff. So organic, it's when actions happens without you paying anything for it to happen. So it can't be organic because there is an email campaign that you're running there. So that's where the last click happened in case of Priya. So if you look at where we are now, there's nothing organic here. It's the last click and first click. These are campaigns running, so you paid for them.
Oh, campaigns, yes.
Yeah, you paid for them. Yeah. So we're looking at, so going to Priya's example, social media, Instagram. You paid for it, but nothing happened there. But there was engagement. Then emails, which it's also classified as paid campaign sent through, because there's a cost related to it. Anyway, it might be minimal, but there is cost. It was sent, and you're reaching to the customers with us. That's why it's not organic, and that's where she ended up downloading. I'm just saying she because Priya sounds like a female's name. That's where CTA happened. Any comments from that perspective? Shazia, any input? Okay.
There is nothing from my side, but I'm not sure if you've noted this question in the comments. It says, what triggered the user to click the link to download from this example? It's the email.
That's a really good question. I'm sure if you're running this business and you see this happening, you'll be asking yourself a question. Why this person saw me on Instagram but didn't take an action, and then via an email took an action? It could be many factors why. It's so difficult, unless you ask the person why then instead of yeah or yeah instead of there. You will then have to run a feedback loop to be able to collect that data and understand why this user behaved the way they did, to make sure that it's not in isolation. This person just happened to be that day. It would be quite interesting to see the data. All of that happens. Obviously, one could make assumptions that if you're selling a more professionally related app, maybe when people are more calmer, when people read emails, they switch into like a formal mode, even if they're at home. There's always that formality that comes in, because when you open emails, you read them, you really give it a time. But on social media, you browse through quickly. There's a lot of things happening there. Where it's social media, where email, it's more personalized. Yamashudu, XYZ, that could probably be a driver. Whereas with the social media, I just see a campaign is there, engage with it and move on. Again, I will assume that's the drive, is that email gives you personalized engagement where you write, dear Mashudu, dear Priya, we would like to talk to you about your fitness journey, da, 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 da. And you've got more space as well to write as much as you can to sell the product. There is a comment here from Frank, just looking at the multi-touch attribution. It's interesting, social media, website, and reminder, yeah. So you could have multi-touch attribution as well. Shazia said that it could also be have to do with the copy. For example, social media, the content could have been brief, yes, and less detailed. The email could have been more engaging, informative, where the user had access to more information, which could have further motivated the user. Yep, more space in the email, as I said, as well as you could personalize your email as well. They feel valued as a customer. Say, oh, they called me by my first name. That's amazing. Let's look at the last click attribution and first click attribution. Things that I think the most common attribution models, starting with the last click attribution and first click attribution. So basically here, what we're saying is that time delay attribution needs to be taken into consideration. What does this mean is that you increasing credit to touch points closer to the conversion. So you said, well, I'm going to work with time delay attribution. So in this case, email gets the credits. Position-based attribution, you emphasize first and last touch points. You'll say, okay, I will work with multi-touches. I will say Instagram and emails are the boss. Then you could say liner attribution. Here you're saying you give credits across all the touch points. Remember, liner attribution is very expensive, all right? So bear that in mind, because it means you're gonna, if that works that way, and it's literally a pattern of your users where they first see it in Instagram, then they download, they go via an email. If you just go through an email, they don't do CTA, but you go through Instagram, then they go to the email, then you've got multiple touch points. Multiple touch points means more money because you're using different channels to achieve the results that probably someone can achieve them with points. That's multiple attribution, as I've explained here. If you look there, you'll see the first discovery. Then you look at visit the website there, and then downloads the app. Yeah. Again, if you could get your marketing campaign spot on with just single touch, you're a genius, because you're going to spend less money to get one customer. So your customer acquisition will be very, very low. So that for me, it speaks to which is the best attribution model. It's single, to be honest. Yeah, I of course understand the value of multiple. But if you're a startup, you can't afford running with all these multiple channels. You want to work with one and get the results, Because the best way, especially for a startup, is either organic downloads or single touch points to get the results. So let's look at attributes that you must align, the attribution models you must align with your marketing goals. You've got, obviously, if you are amplifying brand awareness, then multiple touch points make a lot of sense to you because, they're seeing it all over the place. Instagram, TikTok, WhatsApp, everywhere. You actually are all over the place. So brand awareness is very good for that. But if you're going to go for driving instant conversions, a single touch point is important. Why? Because you want to work with the last click, the one that actually does make things happen, right? You don't want people to, when they move from A to B, they have to go from A, they go all the way to B to C, they go all the way to F and G, and then they come back to B. It's too expensive, takes a lot of time. You want quick results. So then in terms of, optimizing your user engagement, I will say multiples does make a lot of sense there, because you're having all these areas where people are engaging with your, in different channels. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but you're going to spend a lot of money. Straightforward user journey, there's limited touch points, the better. Remember, the more touch points you have, the more likely you're going to lose your customers. So, if someone have to go climb Table Mountain to download your app, probably halfway they say, I've done my part of hiking today. Thank you very much. I'm going to go down on a cable car. So that's the reason why these touch points are important, and they design your entire mapping of your strategy in terms of channels to use. Whereas in terms of the intricate user journey, it's you basically multi-touches models does work because you just want to get as many opinions across different channels from different users. So for me, drive instant conversion for a startup is the way to go. If I have to provide seed funding for a startup in the ad tech space, and that is missing, for me, it's like, whoa, this break-even point is going to take 5 years to be achieved, because now you got to spend more money, have people advertisement all over the place, and you're driving conversion. All right. We dealt with that. Let's look at what's next. So the key factors that you must take into consideration: data accessibility. You must look at the industry and app category before you decide, and experiment as well. So always experiment is A/B testing. So if one has to choose the right model for your app, I'm happy to hear what that model will be. Do you think what will be the goal? What will be the channel? What will be the user's journey that you want to work with? Which attribution model you want to work with it? And whether it will be multiple or single, and give us your justification. I would rather convert this activity directly to your app business model. So I'll give you about 2 minutes, and unmute and share in the chat box. If you've done multiple multi-touch points, I'm happy to hear how that worked out. Also share with me your spending. Do you guys have any customers journey defined so far? How do customers know about you? How do they end up interested in you and then come to your app and then download? Which one is more prominent? I mean, obviously, customers' journeys differs, but there is a pattern that you can see there where you see most of my customers' journey are this way, because you can influence that journey to be able to actually get more users to come through it, because that's like your fishing rod, that's the best way to fish them. Anyone to share? So basically, if one looks at the goal, is what are the marketing goals for this app you have? What channels do you use in your app? How complex is your user journey? And then we look at attribution model. Based on this information, which is the most appropriate attribution model to use? First click, last click, all of those. There is an answer here in the chat box. Let's have a look. Savila says we got our users through social media marketing. And did the conversion happen right there, or do they end up downloading by going somewhere else first? Maybe that should be the question. So just to
So I
bring
think,
it, oh yeah, go ahead. So
so I think they went to the website and then they downloaded that from there. So we're not sure exactly like how where they came from. We don't
yeah,
know.
okay, that's so yeah. I think if you've got a single touch point, it really does make a lot of sense. It's a startup. Let's move to the next part of this session, and we're doing well with time. So this is about implementing tracking and attribution techniques. How will this look like? We'll go through some of these tools that are going to be very useful. So let's look at Google Analytics as well as Firebase. Step one, let's look at analytics for Google Analytics. So you need to obviously to create a GA4 property. We've talked about that. Please install the Firebase SDK. Once you've done that, you need to be able to collect. You'll be able to collect data and be able to track different events that you've defined. Remember, we talk about defining events. So all of that comes together here. You'll be able to configure your properties as well. Remember, you can configure different properties there. In your account, it could be around demographics or interest attributes or in-app behaviors, whatever you feel is relevant for your app. Whereas in terms of step two, you will have to leverage the Firebase for enhancing the tracking. How do you do that is you will have to use Firebase analytics to gain deeper insight of the user behavior. All of this has to do with the user behavior. You also obviously probably could also utilize Firebase Cloud messaging. So basically, this is more of your push notification. You integrate your Firebase Cloud messaging to track the delivery, the open rates, the click-through rates. Why? This because it helps you understand the effectiveness of your push notification campaigns if you're running them. So the other way in terms of step two, to put all this together, you must also utilize Firebase dynamic links. Dynamic links are important, especially to implement them, because why? Because they track the user's engagement across different platforms and channels. So these links obviously can survive the app installation process, can also allow you to attribute conversions to specific campaigns or touch points. Even if, for instance, the user needs to install the app first to be able to use, you could actually track so many things that are different and important to your app. So let's look at setup tracking there. Step three, you could also integrate these with different marketing tools, such as obviously your ad platforms. You could also do, you could also import cost data. What does that mean is that you actually import cost data from your ad platforms into Google Analytics 4 so that you can analyze your return on ad spend. Remember, we talked about ROS before. You can also optimize your campaigns for profitability. The last setup step is to configure attribution settings. These really can customize them. I think it's the best way to do it. I prefer customization and also, you know, run these reports based on what you have customized in terms of from configuring your attribution settings. Getting those settings again, it's very, very important because then your reports will be based on the settings that you've created. So let's look at how to set yourself up for a success. So obviously there's important things you could do. Preparing is important, but planning it's important in terms of your tracking strategy. You need to define your performance indicators, KPIs. Remember, we talk about that. That will help you be able to understand your, what is the what you want to achieve in terms of is this is the conversion that you want to achieve? So you become more consistent in how you name those events that can or user properties that can drive conversion. Then you obviously have to test your implementation, monitor it all the time, and remember what is important: respect data, because there's a lot of privacy around some of these data, so how to use it. So be careful of that as well. Let's look at tracking ID and the UTM parameters. This gets a little bit more technical. You could use different sort of link user actions and conversion to specific campaign of elements, and this could be where probably unique tracking ID and UTM parameters become even more important tool in terms of really getting to set up your tools. Why it is so important is because these link user actions, they basically, if they are tied to specific campaigns, they actually do help you improve a lot of your creatives as well, because you'll be getting feedback from different data source. The other important thing is that you need to understand your UTM parameters. So this again gets more technical. You have to work with the tags that contains information where the traffic is coming from, which campaign is associated with that data. All this is important because when a user clicks on a link with the UTM parameters, your analytical tools capture that information and it attributes to conversions accordingly. So in this case, it's very important as well to make sure that your UTM parameters are properly set. If you don't have that technical skills, you can go on Google Gemini. It will give you some tips. If you can't, then I think it's always advisable to talk to people that knows how to set up this environment, especially around creating UTM links, because they need to work. All right, so that's important. So you could do this manually to avoid errors. There are also many tools that you could use to simplify the process. It's really up to you. Like obviously, Bitly there, it's a popular URL shortener that allows or also offers UTM parameters management features. So have a look at that tool, Bitly, and see how best you could use it. And again, if you don't have those expertise, it does make sense to ask other people to help you. Let's look at common UT parameters here. So it's important to identify the source of the data, where it's coming from, the traffic. Is it from Google? Is it from Facebook? Is it your email newsletters? Because if you don't, then you won't know where Peter downloaded the app. You'll think probably because you like Instagram, you say, oh, it was Instagram. You also have to look at specific in terms of marketing medium. So what does that mean is it cost per click or email or social media? So you need to be very specific of that. UTM campaign, common parameters here is one of the common parameters because it indicates the specific campaign name, such as Summer Sales 2024 or new app launch. Because again, campaign names are important because they define exactly or align with your overall objectives as well. So Summer Sales 2024, obviously this means you're driving sales in summer for the year 2024. So the other common UTM parameters could be again probably UTM terms. These actually used to track keywords in paid search campaigns. You want to see how your keywords perform within your campaigns and see if there's any relationship between poor or best performance in your campaigns and your keywords. What is the UTM content really? It's about the ability to differentiate between different versions of your ads or links, such as bottom A, bottom banner AD. If you're running different activities, does help you to say, well, bottom A probably performs better than banner AD. That's you have to use UTM content as one of the common parameters. So we almost there. So let's look at how to put together unique tracking ID, because you want to make sure that you're tracking the right traffic based on your activities. So you need to obviously, in terms of campaign level tracking IDs, you need to assign a unique ID to each campaign. So that you could differentiate those campaigns, all right? So this ID tracking could be, you could include it in your URL for all the ads with that campaign. So why that is so important is because the benefits there are you track overall the campaign performance. You identify the top performing campaigns. You can analyze these different campaign strategies to see which one really make a lot of sense. So let's look at another unique way to track your IDs is through ad group level. Why? Yeah, you sort of assign unique ID to each ad group. These could obviously be included it has to be included within your URL for all the ads within that ad group. What are the benefits? This speaks for themselves there. You track the performance of that ad group. You identify top performing ad group. This is absolutely at an ad group level. Whereas at a creative level, it's almost the same, but you're tracking all of these at a creative level. So you use, again, unique ID to each ad creative, and the benefits there, you tracking those performance across ad creative level. You can identify which ad creatives is performing better than the other. You could also look at different elements within those ad creatives. So how to implement unique tracking IDs. So that's the steps there. You obviously have to follow the steps there, generate the ID. You then have to add the unique ID to track your URL. Then you do the tracking and analysis. So again, this is important to track the performance of where the traffic comes from. So obviously you can also do it across different devices. So you could see which device seems to drive more traffic. So this is called implementing cross-device tracking. You know, how it does work is that you could do user signing. You encourage the users to sign in your app across all the devices. This allows you to associate their actions with a single user ID. So basically here, what happens here is that one could be using a mobile cell phone and one using a laptop or any other phone. The idea is to be able to attach one user to one account, even if they use different devices. Because if you're using cross-device tracking, you don't want to track one user twice or 3 times because they're using 3 different devices. So that's what it means there. Then you also have to do, you could look at deterministic matching. So basically here you look at a technique such as an email address or phone numbers that actually are identical. And then you link those activities across different devices. What you could also do in terms of cross-device tracking, you could do what we call probabilistic matching. Here, what you're doing is that you're looking at algorithm to be able to identify users who are likely to be the same person based on their behavior, right? It's algorithm-based. Also, device type, operational system, browsing behavior. Each time when they log in, they're more likely to go to the first feature on the left or right of the app. So that's giving that as an example. Why this is so important, I just mentioned now that they're so important because if you're saying that I've got 1,000 users on my app, are they really 1,000 users? Is that data accurate? Are you making decisions based on accurate data? Because you might find that 10 devices actually belongs to one user. So you actually, in real sense, you don't have 10 users, you've got one user. So in terms of interpreting your data all the time, then you'll be misled because you'll think 10 people think this way or that way, whereas it's just one individual with 10 different cell phones. Again, Frank said this should be based on authentication. Yes, that's also another way to make sure that you run your cross-device tracking. It is important, yeah, especially if you're going to look for an investment. Because if I said how many user base you have, you said 2 million. And then I try to correlate 2 million users to your revenue generated. And I see like, whoa, you can't have 2 million active users that are doing in-app purchases. at probably 80%, but your revenue doesn't correlate with that. It's because one user there probably is counting 20,000 times as a user. So yeah, that's important to understand who and how many users you have. So there's a knowledge check here, but again, it's going to break, I think. Let's give it a try. So I will just ask you a question instead of sliders. So what is first step in setting up the Google Analytics for your app according to the training content? One is to integrate the Firebase SDK into your app code. B is to create a new Google Analytics property in Google Analytics. And then C is define and tracking specific events within your app. And D is capture relevant user attributes like demographics. Which answer is going to be A to D? Which one is the correct answer? You can just drop me in the chat box. All right, the answer is B. Why? Because you have to create a new Google Analytics account property within the Google Analytics, so which then happens within your analytics. So the first step obviously involves setting up the central hub for collecting the app data, and then once that is done, you then can create a new Google for property. So this gets very technical. I understand that you might need a bit of time to absorb these learning because this is about UTM parameter settings. Can you see the slide? Is the slider working now?
No, still insufficient access.
No, it's not. Okay. All right. So we will just have to then jump to analyze the attribution data to make informed decision. This is our last part of this session before lunch. Let me have a look at the comments before we go to the last part of this session. Okay, we all have read the comments. That's good. So now you've got all these data that you want to work with it. How do you analyze it in such a way that it helps you make the right decision? So there are many ways one could look at it. You actually could look at exploring multi-touch attribution models. You could look at segmenting your data, visualizing user journey. You could look at time lags. You could look at touch points sequence. You could look at correlating attribution data with other metrics. If you do all of this, you could really uncover amazing insight that could help you be able to make the right decision and be able to boost your app business. So obviously, if you use PlantSwap, it does give you access to a lot of this data because it does explore different multi-touch attribution models. It can help you set up different segments for your data. You can also do visual user journey as well, where it shows you where the customer starts all the way where the customer ends. So have a look at PlantSwap as an example, as one of the tools. What you can also do there is that you could actually run segment by, in terms of if you use Firebase, you could actually segment data by age and location, and where people were acquired, which channel is responsible of acquiring the customer. So let's look at user journey. What is exactly a user journey? So in terms of PlantSwap ad on Instagram, they actually have defined this as a user journey. They actually say that there is an awareness that has to take place. So in this case, does all your campaign do take into consideration that there must be some awareness. Either that one awareness is happening where the CTA will take place, but somebody has to see your ad before they can act on it. So that's really a common ground. There must be an interest. So someone has to show an interest on your app. That is very, very important. What does this mean? It means the user click the ad and browse through your app campaign, a review, or learn more about your app features, all right? So when that happens, it takes them to consideration. So they then think of downloading or not downloading or creating an account. And if that decision is made, they take actions and say, well, let's browse available plans, or let's browse the features that you have. And then once that has happened, they still have to make a decision around retention. I want to stay here. So if you talk about the customers or users journey, this is important because they can fall off anytime, anywhere. They could, the worst case scenario is when awareness doesn't happen and you're spending money and there's no one seeing your ads at all. No one knows about your app. Then you've got a big issue there, because awareness does also affect your organic download as well. Because if people don't know you exist in any form through friends or through family members, you're not going to drive organic downloads at all. Awareness also talks about your app listing configuration. If it's not properly listed, it's not going to create any awareness, because people will search, go to App Store, search, and not find anything. So this is the chain in which user journey may look like. If there could be more steps, obviously trying to reduce those steps, it's as important as how your ads campaign looks like. If your ads make me make a decision quicker within split second where there's an awareness taking place, definitely make a quick interest consideration. I'm interacting with that ad and I'm downloading it. And I said, well, this is where I belong. If that can happen quicker, it also shows how impact your marketing campaigns and that speaks of all the assets that you put together for that ad. We talked about color schemes, punchlines, all of that has so much contribution to customers or users' journey. Let's talk about time lags and touch points a little bit more. How long does it typically take a user to go from download the app to making the first purchase? That is so important. So that data is available. They can tell you if you've got 10,000 downloads in a day. How long did it take them through the customer's journey to make that decision? It is important because you will understand as well how quick can you actually acquire customers. If they take a month to make that decision, you've got any issues, especially relating to your projections, financial projections. So all this information does help you to continuously revise your projections to make sure that you actually also budget for the operation of your business properly. Because if you don't have this data, you don't know. You'll think you'll be able to acquire 1 million users within a month, but hello, it takes 2 weeks or 3 weeks for a user to actually make a decision. So therefore, your projections needs to be relooked at it as well, or your user's journey needs to be looked at it. So that is important to take into consideration, the time lags. Let's look at touch point sequence. We have dealt with this already, where it talks, because your touch point sequence talks about when actually downloads, the process in which it leads to download. Remember, Priya saw it on Instagram. That's the touch point all the way to the email. So that's important, because you're also going to understand any potential for break even. So for a chain, causation chain becoming broken, because if you can't get hold of Priya, but she saw the ad on Instagram, then there would have been no conversion if you can't get hold of her via an email. So let's look at how to how to look at this with other metrics. How do you relate this to other metrics? I think obviously the best approach is always have a combined attribution data with different metrics. You could look at if you're looking for a high lifetime value client, so then you need to feed that into your engagement metrics. The other way to look at it is to look at the users who engage with, in this case, for instance, if I'm running a plant app about a plant, interacting with the plant, so I will look at, I will ask myself a question: do users engage with the plant care tips section of the app? If they do they have higher lifetime value? So in other words, if they engage with that specific feature, they end up staying longer in my app than the ones that don't. So again, that helps you to be able to understand how to therefore take care of your LTV, your high lifetime value users. So in that case, you will boost your plant care tips section of the app, or you keep it stable. But one thing for sure, you won't delete it or make something that will then, jeopardize that user flow of your customers. So let's look at another question you could ask yourself is, are users who participate in the community forum more likely to make repeat purchases? Again, this speaks to user segmentation that is important. So you have to analyze your conversion rates to be able to understand all these metrics in relation to all other tools. I think before I continue with this to the next step, which is going to be last part of this session, do you, from your app, know who are your users? Who are the users who are more likely to stay longer in your app or more likely to fall off? Do you have any of that data from your side? I'll be very happy to hear your stories. Or you just have the users that fall away. You don't know how they interact with the app. They're falling off. Probably they've seen a certain section in your app where it discourages them. It makes them delete the app. Have you experienced something like that before? I'm happy to hear your comments. Have you done any study that shows you users that more likely interact with a certain feature of my app, they tend to stay longer than those who don't? And the users that tend to register through emails, instead of setting up their own separate passwords to the app, they tend to spend more money. Okay, Yabo Kenny says, no, I haven't. All right, so, but you do have users, all right? So, so I will suggest that we start building this data, because this could be where actually your customers are sitting. They're sitting in understanding exactly that if you've got 1,000 users, where do they come from? Which features they are actually engaging more with? And those who engage with those features, do they spend money or do in-app purchase? And even if you build a referral program, you should be able to understand that the users that actually interact with this section of the app tend to actually refer other users, which means that app, therefore, it relates to bringing more users, because it happens to be the app that your users interact with more often. And these are the users that are being more apps. In that case, therefore, you will look after that section of that app because it's your bread and butter. So basically, that's what we're talking about here. So let's look at how to develop your optimization strategy. How do you then take all that you've done to the next level? Obviously, using data. This, again, is data-based decision-making. You have to look at your budget allocation. And this obviously speaks to, whether you're driven by high return on investment, and that also speaks to the certain channels that could feed into that. It also speaks to how much of the budget can you shift it around towards areas where you believe there's high performing touch points. Basically speaks about how agile your business is in relation to the budget around marketing, if you have any. Obviously, testing and always A/B testing, it's important. So another way to optimize your strategies is to look at the ad creatives. You could say, well, look, I've got a bit of resources. I will just create different creatives. I'll just create or tailor different creatives to different touch points. And this is where you find a campaign on Instagram slightly different. Campaign on an email. So you can also obviously do a lot of personalized messaging as well if you're using obviously email as a channel. Again, A/B testing is important. Another way is targeting. Here, basically you target specific audience. Here you actually use attribution data to identify the characteristics of the user who are more likely to convert. And then if you say as well, people that just graduated from university, if they see me through LinkedIn, they tend to actually download my app. You know, they have probably 1 year or minus 1 year of work experience, but they're on LinkedIn. So all that data is important to help you to optimize your strategy. Let me read a comment from Silas. With us, segmentation age under 35 don't stay long because above stays. Let me read. Under 35 don't stay long, but above cost of responsibility, they are more of lifetime users. So under 35, they come and go, but more those who are 35 years plus, they stay longer, if I read your comments correctly. So yeah, it's important to understand your users. So now let's look at how do you then work with refining attribution models. One, you could regularly review your models. It's important. Remember, I said monitoring is everything, and testing. You must test different models to see which one works better. You must incorporate new data source if it's there and validated. You should also always stay up to date with the industry best practices. So for me, that is important, industry best practices. And a lot of people get it wrong because there are certain standards within different industries that you might have to meet within obviously your app businesses. And those standards and regulations changes all the time. So always make sure that you feed that data into all your decision making as well. So let's look at this last activity, which I think we could do it for 2 minutes before the break. So this is the exercise. You could do it using StyleSnap, or you could use your own app here. So let's say you're a marketing manager for StyleSnap. So this is a fashion app that allows you or users to discover and buy trending clothes, like new trends. So you just started running a campaign to drive downloads and increase first-time buyers. So people download, you want them to quickly buy as well. So your objective was to acquire high-quality users who are likely to become repeat customers. You used a linear attribution model, giving so you were giving equal credits to all touch points in the journey. So the question is, your task is, you need to identify high impact touch points. It's a fashion app. You need to optimize budget allocation. You need to work on how to refine ad creatives. You also need to look at how you're going to improve your targeting. Obviously, here you're going to be using data, and you need to tell us how you're going to refine your attributing models. I'll give you 2 minutes, and you can also use your own example from your own app if you have dealt with this activity. Any charts comment? It's a Star Lab. You're a marketing manager. It's a fashion shopping app. You want to discover new users who will also be the first time buyer. So what do you think will be the high impact touch points? Maybe the question I should ask is, have you guys allocated any budgets around your marketing activities? Have you used any data to move that budget around based on your performance of your campaign and objectives? Any comments around it? Go ahead.
Yeah, we've basically adjusted the budget based on how the cost per click improves or decreases, and also based on the time of the week. What we found is a lower budget over a longer period can give a better cost per conversion than having a higher budget over a short period.
And were there any high impact touch points you identified in the process when you reallocate the budget?
No, not particularly that I can think of.
Okay, thanks for sharing. Obviously, when one looks at optimizing your strategy using all the data, high impact touch points comes in as well, because you don't want to move the budget away from the touch points that are actually the driver of your CTA. Yeah, so that's really all from my side, and this brings us to an end of this session. Any questions that you have? I'll be happy to answer them. But I'm also happy if you can drop your questions after the break. We will be able to answer your questions then. And if one looks at takeaways here, is that this session was all about data. So that's why it's kind of like a bit dry, because data driven, lots of data across the board. We look at advanced analytics as well as attribution model techniques that you will need to start getting to understand them to actually be able to get a better understanding of your user behaviors, as well as learn which campaign or touch points are most successful in line with obviously your segmentations as well. So that's what we dealt with. We also explore attribution models as well and how each can affect the insights you want to get into your campaign performance. Lastly, then we learned also about deep diving into your data. Look at more than what probably you do, because correlating that data with many other data and different metrics does help you to understand exactly patterns as well. That is important to be able to get yourself in a position to build a long-term marketing strategy that we hope could take your business to the next level. That's all from my side. And the next step is if you could go there and give some feedback. The next step is, looking at the time now, is that we could come back at 1:20. Is that okay? Shazia, 1:20, will that be okay? Fantastic, thanks. See you just now. Bye-bye.
In this video, I chat with one of the creators of Cult of the Lamb, my buddy Jim.
I made this game in Unity in 400 hours and I recorded every minute of it. In this video, I will show you what it looked like after 10 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, and then every 10 hours until the game was finished. After 10 minutes, I just mocked up primitive cubes as a platform level. I created a capsule to represent the player. After 1 hour, the character could jump with simple input. I used the new Unity input system, which is slower to implement at first, but you will be rewarded later when you add support for multiple controllers and input remapping. 2 hours in, I had a scriptable object with parameters for custom gravity, jump height, movement speed, and quality of life features for players, such as a grace timer to allow jumping off platforms even when you're a few milliseconds late. I've been prototyping platformers for years, and I've watched countless talks on platformer physics dating back to Super Mario, which led me to take a custom approach instead of using the Unity character controller and standard Unity physics. I also knew that I wanted to reuse this logic for NPCs, which is why I named my script character movement instead of player movement. After 5 hours, I had dashing too, but I still needed more hours to improve the feel of jumping, falling, dashing, and double jumping physics. If you use normal 9.81 meters per second square as gravity for a platformer, it will feel slow and floaty, which is why I use a much higher value. Let's check the progress every 10 hours, but first, thanks to Sentry for sponsoring this video. Sentry provides application. After 20 hours, on the third day, I tackled AI controls for NPC. I'll be third day, I tackled AI controls for NPCs. I created a script to shoot raycasts in front of the character so I could detect if the ground disappeared as the NPC approached an edge. The NPCs run the same character movement script as the player, but with different scriptable objects containing different speeds and jump properties. We're now 30 hours in on day 4 and AI kept me busy. I separated the logic into an AI knowledge script that only keeps sensory data and perform the raycasts. I made the script draw a lot of debug lines with colors to show me if the sensors were working as intended. I knew that there would be many raycasts that could affect performance, so from the start I designed the AI knowledge script to gather data over multiple frames so it could be spread out between multiple NPCs. On day 5, 40 hours in, I was still doing AI programming, plenty of troubleshooting and more sensors to add, and creating an AI answer script that could answer questions based on information that AI knowledge had gathered, like, am I at a ledge? Can I land on the other side if I jump now? Is there something over my head right now? If I fall down here, is it too high for me to jump up again? I had also implemented the ability to shoot at tiles and break them into rock debris. After 50 hours on day 6, the main character capsule was replaced by a hero with a run and jump animation. It's always fun when you begin to replace the primitive objects. I modeled the main character in Blender with some inspiration from Turrican and Fallout. I stuck to my trusted low poly style and I used my single palette texture to colorize everything. I had to rig and animate the character and model a rifle. From previous lessons learned with Ultranova, the rifle was kept short to not poke through walls and enemies. On day 7, after 60 hours of development, the environment started to take shape. I had modeled some grass and low poly trees, but I remembered a tutorial on YouTube to create fluffy trees, so I followed that to make the trees more interesting. Check out the link in the description to Pontus Carlsson's fluffy stylized trees tutorial using Quad Mesh to Billboards shader in Unity. I recreated the tree shader in Unity's shader graph. 8 days and 70 hours in, I added logic for the NPCs to follow me. More on this topic soon, because the idea was scrapped for a number of very good reasons. I also added a trail render to show jumping and dashing, and a melee system was implemented so the player could kick opponents if they got too close to use the rifle. Needless to say, the physics was a bit buggy at this stage. After 9 days, we're 80 hours in, and the first enemy NPC capsule was replaced by a knight. The knight was modeled in Blender using the same low poly style and then animated with walk and attack animations. After 90 hours on day 10, testing and tuning began to take more time. The melee combat, ragdoll effects, bullet time slow motion effects, and camera logic needs testing and tuning. I also had box colliders on rock debris, so the player was obstructed by the debris, which made sense, but later on I replaced them with sphere colliders so the players could carve a path more easily. On day 11, 100 hours had passed and a basic UI was added to keep track of score and show health and resource bars. I animated the score using tweening to do a little punch animation each time a score was added. Small effects like this makes it gratifying for the player and it reminds me of a ball hitting the bumper in a pinball machine. I emphasized this effect even further later on. May 24th, 2024, day 12, 110 hours in, sound effects and the effect to crumble the level behind the player started to turn this into an enjoyable game. You were sent back in time, and I imagined the level falling apart, being time catching up with you, and it added a stress element that urges the player to keep moving forward. I also decided to add some more visual detail to the main character with some glowing elements and a backpack, or if it's a rocket pack, I don't know. May 25th was a Saturday, and 120 hours into development, I thought it would be nice to add a soundtrack. I had played music while playtesting the game, and I realized how much it was adding to the feeling of power, control, and being in the zone. In the early days of Infantia, before games, music is what I was making. Now I don't do it as often, but I wanted to create retro-sounding music as a tribute to Turrican and all the beautiful melodies of Chris Hulsbeck. I mixed the retro sounds with modern sounds, and I needed to make the song at least 10 minutes long, because when the player reached further into the game, new elements of music could be discovered as well. Now this was starting to feel rewarding to play. I took the Sunday off, but on Monday the 27th of May, after 130 hours of development, I revisited the music and loaded up my Studio One project and added some flair to ramp up the music the further you got. I layered the melodies with electric guitars, and I spent a couple of hours to play the game. Around the 140-hour mark, I began to model a villager. The idea was that villagers would follow the player and cheer at the might of such a hero, so I animated bowing and cheerful jumping animations. This turned out to be a bad idea. The AI was not good enough to keep up with the player, and the little villagers just looked out of place, and it took away the fast-paced action of the game. Instead, 150 hours in, I added hazards and obstacles like a giant blade and a massive mace. These hazards spin and swing, and it added new challenging elements to the game. The mace is animated with a tween animation, and the blade just uses a hinge joint with a motor that switches direction. 160 hours had passed, and I continued with hazards by adding a giant hammer. I modeled it in Blender using the same palette texture of course, and I implemented it in Unity. The hammers were ruthless and instantly killed you. Oh, and as with nearly everything, implementing hazards was not without bugs. Sites such as this one were common. We're now 170 hours in, and I repurposed the villager to become the archer enemy. The archer draws his bow and shoots to become the ranged enemy. Not the ranged enemy, the ranged enemy. They will get you a lot in this game. The draw poses were created in Blender, and I used script logic in Unity to lurk between the drawing of the bow and releasing the arrows. I probably went into too much detail, having arrows accurately being drawn from the quiver. After 180 hours, I added screaming sound effects for both enemy and player. I also added a medkit because you felt discouraged as you lost health, knowing that you got one step closer to death. The